Hello and welcome to the Quarterback in Your Life podcast, season 2. We're back again. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope you had a blessed holiday. Hope everybody stayed healthy. But we're back, ready to give you consistent, deep, thoughtful conversation and opinions, and just give you something to really kind of go back and spin your wheels on. I'm here today with my co-host, as always, Mr. Che Mock,
Hello.
and also our new addition from the last episode, Mr. James Dutton. What's going on, James?
Yes, sir. How y'all doing?
Doing good, man. We're really glad to have you two on, and really looking forward to this conversation. And as I thought about the direction for season 2, especially after the conversation we had last go round, I really thought about values. And so we talked a lot about relationships last time around. Me and Che, we talked about how our relationship led to so many different things that we've been able to accomplish together from a business perspective. And it just kind of gave me the spur of thought to just lay out some values that I think are important in business, in life, and are key to success. And one of the things that stuck out to me for this next episode is humility. It gets a lot of misconception in popular media. And I saw a quote by C.S. Lewis, very famous. A lot of people have seen and know it. It says, "True humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less." And I think that's so important in today's society, especially in this technological utopia that we live in, where everything is online, available, and where modern society almost kind of celebrates making everything about yourself. And so I just really thought we could come up with some really good opinions and thoughts as it relates to how to implement humility into your life in order to achieve success.
Yeah, and I really am enthusiastic about the conversation because I think it's a topic that doesn't get touched on enough. In the Instagram world, where I think a part of the mold is to sort of portray oneself in the greatest light to the world out there. It's not necessarily about humility. I think that it's good perspective to draw that if you can, convey a message to others that is empowering, but empowering around being, someone who affects others, it creates sort of humility because you absolutely are thinking of yourself less. In fact, you're thinking of everyone else more. So there's wonderful ways, I think, to do that. So I think we'll have a great conversation on this and in that regard. But and that's just a random example of sort of how I think we can bring humility into the equation.
And certainly, Che, and you talked about Instagram and Instagram society, and social media. It's an opportunity for you to be perfect in the eyes of all of your followers and be well admired. And as I was kind of doing some research on the podcast today, I came across this sermon. It had a really cool quote as it relates to social media and humility in today's world. It says, "Self-knowledge, according to the truth of who we are, leads us to act naturally without pretensions or hypocrisy before others, but rather showing them who we really are. Being honest about who we are also leads us to be more understanding with the people around us of their errors, limitations, sufferings, miseries, with empathy," a word that we definitely talked about on this podcast before, "mercy, and compassion. Moreover, it enables one to think more of others than oneself." So clearly runs in contrarian to that what social media allows you to be. And I don't really want to make this thing about social media. I just kind of want to set a framework for you're kind of working uphill as it relates to being truly humble and putting others before yourself in today's society. And a lot of times people aren't, initially rewarded. The hungry go-getter is not always tied to someone that is humble and that possesses humility. So I just think it's really interesting to see such an important value and something that was spoken about so highly in the Bible. And we have the archetype, if you will, of humility in Christ, and yet here we are in society where you kind of see people. It's kind of people that are considered humble or considered weak. You praise the arrogance, you praise the flamboyancy. It makes for great TV, great marketing. So you're kind of almost starting behind the pack if you try to come at life from a very humble standpoint, in my opinion.
So I guess my question for y'all would be, how do you combat a society that praises arrogance? Everything about social media is social media, media. Everything about TV, magazines, the spotlight encourages young people, formable youth, the generation coming up, to put yourself in best light, to put yourself first, put yourself to the spotlight. So how do we combat this? What's a practical way that we can assess it, identify it, and, overcome it, and make sure humility is something that we exemplify in our life? What do y'all think about that?
I wonder if the ability to overcome it is to recognize it. And I guess that maybe answers a question with a question. So I want to be brief, but is it that we recognize the power of empowering? Again, I'm reiterating a point that I don't want to beat down to too much, but is there a way that we give some type of like recognition so that it doesn't become weak? How do we remove the mold that not focusing on oneself, not defeating others, is not wanting to defeat others for one's self purpose is a good thing. So Keenan, I want to give you a little bit of deference in that. It's a very general statement. I don't really,
Yeah.
and I'm going to think a bit deeper on that. But
Yeah. I think it starts with you talked about the willingness, and that takes a special person to be willing to take a step out of themselves. Well, maybe not a special person, maybe just a very, thoughtful person to just let me take a step out of myself for a second. Um, and when you realize in the grand scheme of things how small of a part you play, I think that's very humbling as is. Like when you take a step back and you see all these moving parts in the world, you see all these different things. You think about just the universe. We're on a floating spaceship traveling, I don't know, 60,000 miles per hour through space around a flaming ball of fire. Uh, and somehow everything is in a perfect place where the perfect distance from the sun to sustain life. You have all these amazing inventions, and you look about the development of the world and how we got here. It's hard for me personally to not have a moment where I think, wow, and just kind of lower my um uh, grandiose thoughts or overinflated sense of self. You know what I'm saying? And really just kind of appreciate all the things around me. And I think that comes from uh you have to be that, and then you also have to have some sort of a, I think intellectual curiosity is important as well. Because when you start to really look around and Google things and talk to people that are experts in their field and really get exposed to some of the things that people are doing, I just feel like those are moments where you have no other choice but to understand that you don't know anything. You are an infant in knowledge, and there's so much to learn, there's so much to explore. I feel like those things do not coincide with being arrogant. You have to, in order to truly accept a place of humility, in my opinion, and it's something that I'm really working on. And because it's almost a habit, or it's almost I don't know, like the first thought to just kind of defend yourself by throwing up that barrier of pride and arrogance, and puffing out your chest to have that over. It's a protection mechanism. It's I
A
think people do it
compensation.
exactly. People are just trying to protect their own insecurities by that arrogance. And I think it takes a lot of confidence, ironically, to be humble, to be truly humble, and what it really means, and not just fake humble for the media, and saying all the right things for the right people, but behind closed doors, you're not really living that life. But to be truly humble takes a lot of self-confidence and a lot of acceptance for who you are.
I would say one thing to kind of dovetail from what you're bringing up here. A mentor of mine made a fantastic point. It is not to emphasize what not to do, but instead to focus on what we should do. What are we focusing on? What are we? If we're moving in the direction of humility, that means we're moving away from arrogance. And to go back to the quote that you let out with was, humility is not. In essence, it was thinking of yourself less, not thinking less of yourself, not degrading yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And what that communicates is that it's not about me. That's a quote that when I started publicly speaking and traveling and being on stages and getting recognition in one form or another. And, y'all have had your recognition in different forms. And if it becomes about you, there's something that is perverted. And figuring out how to stay grounded, because if it's about me, then it becomes about stepping over or stepping on people who we're supposed to be benefiting and lifting up. The residue of our life is supposed to benefit other people. But if it's about me, then it's not about them. And so one thing I guess I would say, just would love to hear your thoughts on this, is, have y'all ever seen a cannibalistic tree? No tree ever feeds on its fruit. The fruit of a tree always benefits those around the tree. That's why I think the Bible talks about bearing good fruit. It's because you're bearing fruit. So the gifts of our life, the way it explained to me was that the gifts of our life and on us are all for other people. When we start to hoard what we've been given and what we have and who we are for ourselves, it becomes perverted, it becomes contorted, it becomes about building our sandcastle rather than building the kingdom, rather than partnering. It becomes about a solo act, and you've never seen a successful Christian island, because fruit never benefits the tree, it benefits those around us. How have y'all seen gifting used and wielded bad? I'm sure poorly. I'm sure, in the NFL, Keenan, you've probably seen this, Che, in your professional sphere, and people who've had great resources and things like that. Talk to me about what it's like when people start to eat their own fruit. What have you seen?
Wow, man, that's a deep.
Yeah.
Never seeing a cannibalistic tree.
Yeah. I like that.
That analogy is
I like
real.
that.
Yeah. The old saying that what is it, that greed, greed kills people, right? I mean, like, I think hoarding the fruit of the tree, hoarding the exceptional gifts and that we've been given, create um create a misconception of what we're here for, I think, right? And so when you have that misconception, then it's impossible to be empathetic, because you're holding all the fruit. You can't hold empathy for those who don't have the fruit of the tree, because you have the fruit of the tree and you're not willing to share it. So I've seen it ruin people. I've seen it ruin relationships. You see people get so bogged down and caught up in trying to exceed or better themselves versus the next person, that it overwhelms them to the point where they, sort of lose all perception of reality, and they defeat themselves. They forget why they're striving for that greatness. I mean, Keenan, what are your thoughts on that?
I really liked, first of all, just to kind of reiterate, I love that the analogy. And it was definitely kind of on par with the point I was going to make next, because we always want to have a why. Like, I don't want our listeners to feel like, oh, we're just talking just to hear ourselves talk, ironically, in a humility podcast. But why is this important? Like, why would it help you in a business sense? Because traditionally, especially in a capitalist society, greed and selfishness is rewarded, seemingly. But I think it's important. You see the happiest people we've talked about before. You see the truly the most successful and content people, as we talked about before, are those that don't have a problem giving. I had a call today um, with a rather new mentor, hopefully, budding relationship, and he was like, "There's two types of people: there's givers and there's takers." He's like, "I prefer to be a giver, because when you just give, somehow it always seems to come back tenfold." And so that's kind of the essence of being a humble person. Again, to just say, in a business perspective, how are we going to develop a business that is a tree that bears good fruit? We're not just developing this business for the sake of our own health. Like, we're developing to have an impact that transcends our own personal wants, goals, and ambitions. And I think when entrepreneurs and people are going about it that way, and we've talked about this as well, that's when they run into success. So
And let me expound on that too very quickly, because it resonates with me personally. I have never in my professional career been so leveraged, because of the pandemic and because of just circumstances as they exist in my profession. But I'm okay with it because I've surrounded myself with good people. And what's interesting that we talk about sort of, good talking points such as empathy, but also, bearing good fruit and being compassionate, searching for knowledge. When you share those characteristics with others, like when you're in that constant search of knowledge, it breeds, it doesn't breed contempt. It's contagious. I think that's one of the things, James, that can help people be humble, is that humility. If you are truly offering it, or if you're truly perplexing those characteristics, or not perplexing, but portraying those characteristics that make up someone who to be humble, you can get people in the business world to work for you in circumstances they might not otherwise work for another person. Like, I think that, we have a program that is an internship program that we've never done before at a very large scale, to where, my busyness has increased, but I think that it translates to those who are engaged in our process, because they know that, like, we really are knowledge searching and we're trying to build something special. And we're also trying to give it to them too. Right. And so I don't know. I think that that's bearing good fruit, and people want to be a part of, that tree. So I think it's contagious.
So how do we, in between, like as we transition kind of into some principle and some practical, how do we be self-aware rather than be self-centered? Because people can quickly go from, like, because self-aware is healthy, where you become aware of your residue on people. You're aware of your synergy. You're aware of the effect. You're aware of how your actions affect others, your presence in a room. But that can quickly become contorted if it's self-centeredness. If it's like, I want to be about me, with this false humility, which can be its own trap. How do you think, just real quickly, because I think I've got another question I'd love y'all to jump on, but how do we be self-aware rather than be self-centered?
that is a great question. And honestly, I was looking at my notes and trying to figure out, like, where we wanted to go next. And you literally kind of directed it there. And this is completely organic. But I think it takes mentorship. It takes the ability.
I was hoping you would go there. Please. I was hoping. Yes.
Yeah. So, it takes you seeking out and having, mentors, like I just mentioned, but about the guy that told me about being a giver or a taker. You have to, have people around you that can help course correct, can help, give you objective feedback, and allow you a space for accountability. Because, any successful business person, that you always hear them talking about masterminds, and you always hear them talking about having a network and building your network. But if you have a real true network, they'll help you, and they're full of quality people. They will help you um stay on the right course, and they understand what type of person you want to be and what type of business you want to run. And they can help. You can bounce ideas off them, you can bounce, unfiltered thoughts off of them. And that relationship will allow you to kind of figure out where you are. Am I going a little too far into the deep end? Am I getting a little selfish? Am I losing sight of what my plan was when I set off on this journey? People around you can help course correct you. And conversely, I think it's important as well, um, that it's the other way. I think the mentor has to have the humility to learn from the mentee. He or she may be younger than you, but there's certain perspectives and ideas that I'm sure, if you truly care about that relationship, can be learned and adopted. But it's only with humility can either side of that relationship work. And to answer your question, James, that self-awareness can be found.
I
Man,
feel
that's
like
deep.
the only way, like at least in my experience, I mean, I came, just a quick snippet, like I came from absolutely nothing, abject poverty. My parents were evicted. I had no money. We were on food stamps, food cards. Um, And when the only thing that changed my life, second to the grace of God and him moving into my world and rearranging my whole life and submitting to him. Secondly, the most important thing I found was mentorship, Keenan, finding people whose fruit I wanted. And I was pretty bold about it. I would go up to these people and I would say, listen, I don't know how you got to where you got. I have no idea where I'm going. And you have to have the humility to approach people and say, listen, I don't have it all figured out. If you try to act like you have it all figured out, number one, people will see that. Number two, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's a truest form of arrogance, one of the truest, to say, I don't need advice. Because number one, nobody can speak to your blind spots. Nobody
Let me
can
ask you
speak to your
guys.
faults.
Let me ask you guys this question, James, while you're, because I think it's so, what you're saying is so true. Like, because I struggle with this because I specifically enjoy mentoring, right? But I don't know sometimes. I feel like my persona is one of where I have to provoke confidence because I'm dealing with people, Keenan yourself, right? Like when we first met, like you don't want somebody who is timid or not willing to go the extra mile for you. But at the same time, you want somebody who's going to be real and passionate and humble, also not to outweigh your successes, but to balance the successes that you've had with the successes they want to have to create something great. How Okay, mentorship, I hear that. How though can I continue to draw perspective, especially when I'm a mentor to so many, not even necessarily out of choice, but out of sort of organically, but also out of choice through having interns or having like people who work under me. How do I do that? How do I stay humble?
My question to you would be, how many mentors do you have? How many people are you drawing on to speak into your life? Because mentors who don't have mentors become stagnant. There's two seas in the Middle East where Jesus used to operate, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, and they're very close, but they're extremely different because the Sea of Galilee is alive, it's flourishing, it's green. Peter, James, John, you see people going to get fish from the Sea of Galilee because it's so alive. Dead Sea, 40 miles south, I think, maybe east, 40 miles away, is completely dead. That's why I call it the Dead Sea. Nothing lives in it. It's barren. And the difference geographically is that there's a river running into the Dead Sea and there is nothing running out of it. The Sea of Galilee, on the other hand, has a river running into it and a river running out of it. So you see Jesus, God, operating around the most geographical, profound example being we need a river running in and a river running out. Because if we ever stop being learners, then we stop having the ability to teach well. That's my thought.
I love, so is the answer, Keenan, then, I mean, thank you, James, for that
Yeah.
perspective. Is the answer then that we have to always, you said mentorship, is it that you have to always make time, whether it's through an audio book, through a person, through some metaphysical something to continue to
You
have a
can be.
mentor?
I think it's personally, and Ken, you can speak to this too, but I think it's having that one-on-one because you need people to speak to your blind spots and people that I think you can be mentored by anybody who is. You want to be wise about this, obviously, but you can be mentored by somebody who's one step ahead in life in one area. So, for instance, my roommate, he's way behind me in a whole lot of stuff, or ex-roommate was way behind me in a whole lot of stuff. He could teach me stuff in the physical. Che, I might know more about the Bible, but you know way more about way more about finances. You can teach me a whole bunch about finances. I might be able to teach you some things about scripture. And so, like, there's so many ways that we can be mentored by people around us if we just recognize, hey, they're better than us. If you're winning, I want what you have, and being unashamed about, making the ask of like, hey, teach me, show me, what am I missing at any time in our life, any stage.
Yeah, it's almost like a balanced diet, Chase. You know, you got you might be eating a lot of protein, a lot of protein, a lot of protein as representation of your mentorship and your efforts to help interns go on from working at ESQ to bigger and better things. Not to diminish ESQ, but you need a little bit of vegetables and fruit in your life. You know what I'm saying? And to go along in with the whole fruit of the fruit of the tree. Sometimes you might need a different fruit. You might need there's an area that you may have that you feel like you have to have fulfilled and your cup is empty and needs to be filled in order to give back. Because if you constantly, to James's point, pouring out, 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 you have nothing left. At some point you're to be dead. You have nothing left to give. Nothing is pouring into you. So I think it's important for you to take the step to find people to help pour into you. But the interesting part about that is I think there is a misconception about who can pour into you. It doesn't always have to be somebody that's older than you, because there can be a lot of wisdom found in people that you mentor. It could be you if you really take the time to get to know and learn and listen to the people that you talk to. I'm sure that there are some ideas and things that can be very profound and have a very unique effect in your personal life from what they say. And they may not even be trying to. And that's the beauty of the whole thing. But in order to really see that, it goes back to the central value that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, and that's humility. Like understanding, like, this person may actually have something to bring to the table that I don't know, even though I'm supposed to be pouring into them. And I think the best mentor mentee relationships are when not only does the mentee become fulfilled, but also the mentor. And again, it's just it's an ever ending feedback loop. When you pour into your mentee, they may have other mentees themselves that they may, it's just a train of knowledge that they may continue to give back and give and just help people as they continue to go.
I wonder if that excitement is that. I wonder if people are hearing this and getting like a level of adrenaline. Like, I don't know, like, because I know, like, just now when we were talking,
This is
as
the
we're
key.
talking,
If someone misses this, they miss it all. Keep going. But like this is they should be excited because this is huge. You miss this, you miss something massive that'll mess you up for life if you miss mentorship and humility. But keep going.
yeah, that's it. Because, right, like, as we're talking, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, I have people that rely on me to give them guidance, but I've been lacking truly. I like now recognizing this. And I think one of the things that probably brings someone to a level of humility is to recognize when they've not been humble enough, or when they've been too
It's big.
engulfed in their own personal well-being while trying to balance it while being a mentor without getting the mentorship that they need. It's like, is it like the cannibalistic tree, James, or maybe not even, the negative connotation of being a cannibalistic tree, but maybe it's just being a tree not getting enough water, not
Mhm.
getting enough sunlight.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so you're not
Yeah.
intentionally being a cannibal.
You're not
just
being
eating
fed.
yourself because you're not getting the nutrients.
You're not
Yeah.
being fed. I would say as we wrap up 100%, my personal opinion of the truest form of arrogance is to not have a quiet time. And why do I say that? Is to not get alone, to get away with God is the truest form of arrogance, because effectively what that's communicating is saying, I don't need you. I'm good to do my day and do my life and do my relationships, do my finances, do my marriage if you're married, do my friendships if you got friends, but without you. And so when I'm not having a quiet time, when I'm not getting grounded in scripture, in the word, when I'm not getting his thoughts on my broken thoughts, his insight on my deficit, I become a lot about me, because I'm not getting carved out. I'm not receiving the surgery to get rid of because our default's the worst form of us. And if you're constantly running on your own default, number one, without time spent with God, and number two, time spent without people pouring into you and calling you higher, because you don't always need to be called out. I think that's a misconception, like call them out. It's like you need to be called higher. If you're not getting called higher and you're not getting fed by the word, by your time with God, even getting in his presence, then I think that's how you become truly arrogant.
That's a word for me, because that's something that I'm certainly sorely lacking in my life is the more quiet time. And I think it's an antithesis of modern society, much like humility is in my opinion, an antithesis of modern society. And that we're always go 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 go, more 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 more, that we never, usually the most centered and grounded people are the ones that truly find the happiness and contentment that we spoke about so many different times on this podcast. And so I'm really, really glad that we had this conversation. I'm glad it was organic. Had no idea where we were going to go with this, but I think the main point is recognizing um, your need to step back, to realize that you don't have it all, that you ain't got it all together, to recognize there's so much that you don't know and so much that you can learn, to understand the ways to keep you on track and to keep you self-aware is to develop a strong, trustworthy mentorship network. And subsequently, while you're getting mentorship, find a way to pour into somebody else and continue to give that fruit for others to feed from.
Trey, you got any closing thoughts? And I'm going to wrap us out with with a biblical principle. Any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear these macro level points of compassion for others, empathy towards others, perspective, knowledge searching, and then to confidently, you know, provide and get perspective, and being okay with that. And I mean, I think that that's beautiful. And again, I got a level of excitement just while being in this podcast of hearing things that I think have kept me from being whole, because I've been so caught up in a bubble of trying to do it all without seeking mentorship to help me guide through what I'm trying to convey as a tree bearing fruit. So I love it, and I hope others get excited about it too.
So the hope is to end every single week, every single session at least, with something we can bite our teeth into. And what I'm going to end us with today is the biblical principle of Samson and Delilah. And just real fast, you can find that in the book of Judges. If you want to go research what Samson did and what he was about, essentially what he was is he was probably one of the most arrogant, most powerful, strongest, most fierce, greatest warrior in the history of mankind. But he was also the most arrogant because he exemplified that he was entitled, that he didn't need discipline, that he didn't need to follow the instructions of God. In doing so, it led him to his downfall. He was the man who killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Bad dude. He was not to be messed with and toyed with. There's a lot of crazy stories that are actually really fun to read. For the Bible is full of so many crazy things. People who don't read it, even if you're not a Christian. I mean, I'm talking war. I'm talking love, sex, calamity, conspiracy. It's exciting. And I would say go read this story, because you see a man who had all of the strength physically that anyone could ever want, but he was taken out not by an army, not by a kingdom. He was taken out by a woman while he was taking a nap. That was literally what took down the strongest, most powerful warrior in the history of the Bible, because God told him, in his instructions, through his counsel, through his leadership, through his guidance, which he ignored, which is his parents. Not all of us have parents we want to follow, but the principle is leadership. He ignored all of that, and because he wanted what he saw in front of him. So there is something to be said about the protection from Scripture. It's not to restrict us. God has two objectives. It's to bless us and protect us. And I think you can see that in the life of Samson. Wasn't taken out by an army. He was taken out by a woman in a nap. And so read up in Judges. There's a few chapters that can give us some insight into what will take place if you ignore the instructions of God, and what happens when you don't have the right people around you. You never hear about Samson's sons. You never hear about his legacy. You never hear about his story because he didn't have one, because he got taken out. So that's what I got to say. It's been good with you.
That's a word right there. So I encourage you all to do your own research, do your reading, get your quiet time in this week, and join us next week for another episode of the Quarterback in Your Life podcast.